We'll be FaceTime or something, or talking on the phone. I'll grab that kid and just keep rubbing that ring in his face.
Work ethic's obviously very important as well.
When it's all said and done, I want 5 quarterbacks.
Recruiting, most important part of the game.
You want me to call you Mike or Magic? Because, there's the whole Magic. Yeah, I don't want to go there.
And welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Magic. We are streaming live tonight for the first time on YouTube and Facebook. And who you have on the screen is, of course, Waregl, Kaz, and Ray. And through the blessing of StreamYard, we no longer have to wonder who our participants are because the names do, in fact, appear. So welcome each and every one of you. Glad to have you on, and I'm sure we're going to have some other folks on later on as they join us. One thing I do want to mention is if you are not part of the conversation, go ahead and mute your microphone. That way we can eliminate as much feedback as possible. Tonight is going to be an open forum, so hopefully your mics won't be muted very much at all because we'll be asking you to engage into various topics. We've also have some of the Gridiron Dynasty forum questions that we're going to lay out for you all to discuss as well. So, and of course, anytime you want to bring up anything and mention it, you just go right ahead and we'll see what we have as far as intelligence to answer or discuss that question. So that kind of means that I'll stay out of it.
I was going to say, my mic's going to be muted all the time if you're going to be going on intelligence. So.
No. Well, the first thing we want to get to tonight is something I'm going to put up on the screen for you, and I'm going to explain it. Take a look at it, and I'm going to ask for the three of you to have some input. So take a look at this. It's going to cut across the screen, and what you can see there is an actual formation setup for the pro set, and in the bottom portion there is the actual playbook showing that particular pro set. And in this case, the formation is a pro set running back. That's the name of it. And the intention is to get the running back a bit of passing, some receptions. One of the questions that was posed to me in this particular case, and that's why I bring it up, is with this setup, it shows at the very top, you can see where the quarterback's progression will be, or I should say his target zones will be. And for the running back, the possession running back, everything except deep, he's 100%. And of course, the two wide receivers are at 50%, both of them deep. The intention being that the wide receivers go deep on every play. So having said that, if that's true, then the actual playbook setup, which is depicted below it, shows some short passing, medium passing, long passing, and then that 10% deep. Now, here's the topic for discussion. With the quarterback looking primarily to hit the running back on the majority of the plays based on this setup, do the wide receivers, in fact, go deep every play? And do they, in fact, drag a defender with them, essentially occupying a potential tackler so that the running back, when he does catch the ball, has one less guy to worry about? So if you guys have got a good look at this, I'll go ahead and clear it off the screen. And let's go to Eric first. Eric, what are your thoughts on this setup, and do you want me to leave it up?
No, you can go ahead and take it down as far as I'm concerned, Mike. I would think that when the running back is kind of who the quarterback's looking for, and it's set for the receivers, pretty much to go deep every time, I would think they'd have to take somebody. I mean, I know that they say that on the defense it's not really man to man; it's more of a zone type situation with the way the engine runs. But still, even in a zone type defense, you're going to take if a guy goes deep, you're going to have somebody go with him to cover the zone. So I would think, yeah, it would take at least a cornerback, if not a quarterback and a safety, out of the equation to open up a spot for maybe the running back on a medium or a long.
Kaz, what about you? You got anything to add to that, or a different opposing view?
No different opposing view. I completely agree. In fact, somebody asked that question on the forum last week, earlier in the week, and I actually said the same thing. I think the question was, who is going where at what time, and does he take somebody? And I said, even if a wide receiver is running, if he's running deep, somebody has to be going with him, because that's what you show normally in the coverage. You never see, in fact, if you look at the play-by-play, you never see a wide receiver is deep and nobody's covering him.
Mm-hmm.
So they always have somebody that's slated to go deep. And of course, in our terminology and methodology within the game, most of the time we think it's a strong safety. There's a little sometimes up there as the pace. But the fact is there's somebody. If you send somebody deep, there's somebody there. And I played with that a little bit in my time, where I had somebody always deep and always short, and I tried to hammer the middle. Not saying it worked for me when I did it, but that is actually the premise that, like when you look at like Nitros and he broke down the whole middle passing, how to attack it. That was actually the thought he was going with as far as wide receivers or running backs, flooding the zone, right? The whole flood the zone theory we all talk about. So if you flood the zone technically, right, and then you run somebody deep and you run somebody short, you should have a better possibility of hitting that middle pass or the short.
You should. Ray, your thoughts?
I've actually had mixed results with it. I've done that a lot. Basically, what I call a stat horn offense, where I just throw to the running back or one wide receiver. Usually I'll set my wide receivers to go deep at 1%. And just usually when I've thrown deep, I've thrown interceptions. I just set it at 1%, hoping they're going to be going downfield, and maybe they'll get one pass thrown their way that'll be incomplete. But it seems like just from time to time, it's opened up the field where my running back's been able to go crazy, and then other times just had mediocre games.
Now, in this particular setup, one of the advantages that a lot of newbies can take from this, other than everything that's been discussed so far, and that is the topic of getting your freshman playing time. And we mentioned that previously on a couple of shows about just how important it is to get those freshmen in the game so that their categories get that bump, that 1 or 2 or possibly even 3-point bump throughout the first couple games of the year. And this would be one way to do it. You take your freshman wide receiver and you put those 2 guys in those wide receiver slots. And when you're targeting those running backs, short, medium, very short, and hopefully those guys can get some playing time out of that formation, out of that particular set, without affecting your team in a negative aspect. That offense is really not going to be affected by a wide receiver who's going downfield that's not truly part of the play. So for the new guys out there, that's one way to look at it. As far as getting freshman playing time, other than setting up an entire offense just to do that, those are the little nuances that you can practice with and try out to get some of the guys playing time. Eric, what about you as far as getting some freshman playing time in situations like that? Is there something special that you like to do that you're willing to share?
Well, not necessarily in say the lineups and formations, but one thing that is just kind of the real simple and most obvious is, if you're winning by a bunch or losing by a bunch at halftime, adjust your your depth chart and get freshmen and let them play a whole half, because more than likely, if you're winning by a bunch or losing by a bunch, the outcome is pretty much sealed at halftime. You could get the young guys in there and get their work ethic and other stats up a little bit in a game that's pretty much decided and isn't going to hurt you the rest of the time. You just have to remember after that game's over to go back and put them back where they're supposed to be to start the next game. But that's a real easy, simple way to get younger guys some playing time. And you brought up getting those stat bumps, and one question that I kind of have, and throw this out to the other two guys to see what they think, is do you think in work ethic as a freshman or a sophomore, if you've promised them a start and you're giving them those starts, do they get a bigger bump in work ethic than if you hadn't promised them a start but you're giving them the same playing time?
I have a belief that if you have two guys identical, they're both getting the same amount of playing time. One of them was promised to start and one was not. The one who was promised to start is a happier camper because he's getting what was promised, and therefore the bumps are just a bit more. Now I can't quantify that because I didn't do the research to that depth, but I know that the guys who I promise starts to generally do have a lot better increase in equal playing time. Given equal playing time, they have a lot better increase in their core values just because they are happy, right?
Yeah, the freshman starts I've thrown around. Yeah, if I play them as freshmen, is sometimes I mainly run wishbone where I'll have a couple of good stud running backs. I'll put the freshman start in and then another freshman in at fullback. And yeah, the freshman starts have grown more when they've both been high potential, average potential. The promise starts really grown. And another thing I like to do is just with like my kickers and punters, give them the 75% playing time and then a sophomore start.
Right. Yeah.
Get them to hopefully get 2 seasons where they'll grow like crazy and then go on from there.
Yeah. Kaz unfortunately can't. Go ahead.
I was going to say as far as that throw to one running back offense, I did that last season in Hayes at Cal Poly and had I think it was my first string and second string running backs. They were my first string running back set the all-time record for yards and receptions.
Wow.
My backup set the touchdown record. The starter was second place, and my third string back came in at like 6th or 7th.
Yeah, that's
on touchdown receptions, and
that's just phenomenal.
If you got good backs to throw to, that works great.
Yeah. And Kaz can't chime in on the whole freshman starting time because his teams are too good to let freshmen see the field.
I might have good growth, but I might have good growth. I'm always up there as far as the strength of the growth of the team. But I definitely try to get my freshman playing time. And one thing, just for the newbies, I practiced it. I tried it. I wasn't committed enough to do it. But one thing that I did was what you were saying, Mike. I actually had where one of my offensive linemen was dedicated to that R1 slot. And, that was always a freshman. Usually, if you're a good recruiter, you'll have a freshman that's worth that playing time. Whether his work ethic is in the 70s, or whether you got lucky and you got a guy that's 85. Now, in terms of formation IQ, he's going to be low, but sometimes having that that kid that's an 85 and he's a freshman, if you're playing him and his work ethic is growing, you're offsetting the negatives you're going to encounter anyway, and depending on how your team grows, most of us, I'll say most of us because I think that's what I see. Most folks are going 2-2-2. Or 2-3-2-3 as far as recruiting linemen. So by the time the rest of the guys around that freshman are holding it up anyway. But the fact that he's getting that dedicated playing time is creating huge growth. It kind of, I know that was the last show I was on. We had that discussion, and I know we're going to get more into it, but we see what Jason Freeman did with his growth. And that's all growth. It's, if we were to go back and look at the guest ratings of his team 4 years ago, you look at it and you say, average at best, or even below average in some cases, you probably would think. But the fact is that he goes for that growth. He knows what he's doing. He has a great system as far as coaching, but then it's backed up with getting players that are going to improve. And by the time they're seniors, they perform. And I'll throw out a little tip. I personally think that high work ethic makes the players play harder for some reason. I think they factor that into the results. Because there's times when I've played somebody and I said, what's going on? I've had a better team and I've lost. And then there's times when I've played. In fact, when I had a little run a few years back, my work ethic was fantastic. And I was playing some teams, in that whole stretch that I thought I should, I said this is going to be close. But the fact is I was losing at the half, and then in the second half they came through. So for the young guys, maybe that's something they should start focusing on, trying to factor in that work ethic into what they're doing.
And then you get guys like Charles Brake, C Brake as we know him, CE Brake. He'll tell you that work ethic doesn't matter. Potential doesn't matter. You put the best guys on the field and you kick everybody's ass. And that's what he does. And I'm like, dude, every one of my guys is very high, potential through the roof, work ethic phenomenal. They've got formation IQ that's unmatched. You bring some D3 team up here against my elite D1A, and it's 70-0 at the half. What the hell? He has that magic touch. I don't know what it is, but he's got his system and it works for him. But like you said, you've got experience with the things you do and they work. And I'm a firm believer in work ethic. I think it plays a bigger role and a bigger factor in some of the players' development than we give them credit for or we expect out of them. So, as people develop their own skills and their own abilities in this game, they'll come up with ideas and test thoughts or possibilities, and hopefully they'll come on the show and, well, for nothing else, just to teach us. Let's go to some of the questions that we actually have. Let's see if I can find them. Y'all have to bear with me. Let's see. We are going to go to the forum where we have some questions, and here's the first one. I guess that's KS Sparks wants to know the most effective initial recruiting strategy. Start out with calls, letters to gauge interest, or send AC scouts right away. What do you think, Eric?
Well, I don't think the calls and letters are necessarily something that I get involved with right away. I mean, AC scouts, just to get that potential is really where I go, and then try to see from there, how hard I want to recruit the guy. But I haven't figured out what a lot of other coaches have about the nuances of the letters and the calls and the wording and stuff that you can read from all that. But it is a cheap way to go. But I just really think those AC scouts tell me a lot more than what the letters and the calls.
Now, as far as sending those calls or letters to undecideds, that's a good way for a coach to turn a recruit green if nobody else is on him. It may work 1 out of 10 times, but if you're inundated with undecideds in your area, throw everybody a phone call and see who may turn green for you as a backup, nothing else. Ray, what do you think?
I haven't had any luck with phone calls or materials. I've tried that on undecideds, and they stayed undecided and enjoyed the material, but that was about it. Usually, if there's undecideds and I really want them, I'll throw a scout, maybe a campus visit or two. Most of the time, especially if it's a heavily populated area, I'll just throw a bunch of scouts out and see who the big boys want, and then just pretty much go after whoever's left. And then at that point, I'll just start hammering out campus visits and throwing out starts and playing time, and away we go.
Now, I know Cash uses those booster gifts. He's always promising cash and women, right?
I've only been caught twice. That's it. If those worked, I would try them. But I usually I started recently. I actually started doing the coaches calls. Doing the $10 on the undecided guys, and might spend $1,000 or whatever, or might spend, $900, 500, whatever it is. And you might get, 2 or 3 guys that even,
Right.
turn. But sometimes you do find a diamond in the rough. You find a guy that, he might not be your number 1 or 2 guy, but he's there in case, and, so I found luck with that. Recently I started actually going with the campus visits. So I started that probably about 3 or 4 seasons ago, just sending campus visits. It's worked. I can't say it's worked any better than what I was doing before, but it does work. My biggest thing is just trying to stay local, stay close to home.
Now, the question that usually comes up, I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was going to say the other thing, reason why I do an AC scout right away instead of doing phone calls and letters is because of that face-to-face you got to have. And,
Right.
You might forget if you turn a recruit green with a letter or a phone call that you still have to get that, basically AC scout in anyway to be able to sign the guy. So to save, some dumbass like me from forgetting that, just send it out there early, get that face-to-face taken care of because they won't deny it. And then that way you've already got that established.
Right. Now, one of the questions that usually comes up in the same field as this one is, why do recruits keep turning down my home visits and my campus visits? How do I get them to accept that? And the one thing I've always said is send more AC scouts, send more head coach scouts, and then, maybe a couple letters here and there, because what you're trying to do is get them to realize you exist. Because if they're turning down your campus visits or your home visits after you've already sent them an AC scout, they're not interested in you, as it would indicate by the lack of the acceptance. So one way to turn them is to send those head coach AC scouts, because they have to accept those. They can't turn those down. And once they've accepted a couple of those, now they're warm up to you. Now you're more likely to get them to accept the campus visit. But again, what I don't know for sure is just how much those letters and phone calls help in those situations as far as getting them to lean your way to accept those campus visits.
Something else that I was told or read on the boards, and I've not really messed with it very much, is instead of sending 10 at one time, send 2 and then send another set of 2. You're in the same recruiting cycle, but if you want to send 8 visits, don't do all 8 at once. Do 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and you're more likely to get them to accept it if you send more repetitions than you are just sending them all in one shot. Now, whether that's true or not,
Exactly.
I don't know. That's what I've read.
Yeah, and that was the good thing about the Yatzer recruiting tool is you could set that tool up to send 15 visits or campus visits, and it would do it one at a time. It wouldn't dump it twice, whereas with the system that we have outside of Yatzer, of course, you've got to manually go in and do that, and that becomes tedious. And I think that's why a lot of people just say, screw it, I'm sending 5. And then he says, I'm not interested, and you've lost all 5 chances that recruiting cycle. Whereas if you've done one at a time, about the third knock on his door, he says, you know what? Yeah, let me come visit your campus. So you get to save some. Let's go ahead to another question we got from the board. And this actually kind of talks back about what we were talking another show or two ago. And he asked if athleticism is a multiplier on all the other traits. If so, what impact does it have? What do you think, Ray?
Athleticism, quite honestly, it's one I really don't pay attention a lot to. It'll factor in if I'm trying to decide between a couple recruits, the higher athleticism, I'll go with him. But like linemen, I'm looking at pretty much everybody I'm looking at work ethic. Like linemen, I'm looking at strength and blocking. Wide receivers, speed, hands are loose. And if I'm trying to factor between a couple, if maybe they got similar scouts or similar numbers, I'll look at athleticism then. But it's been one I really haven't paid a whole lot of attention to.
I've read on the boards and in the Dev chats from time to time a slight snippet where athleticism is important, but I've really not uncovered anything in my research to totally convince me that it's important. Have you, Kaz?
I've actually went with the thought process that in every I played the basketball. I played basketball. I played the soccer. I played the baseball. On the what ifs, and I know in basketball it's a big multiplier. They actually come out and state it. They're like, hey, look, if a recruit is, or if a player is, blah blah blah, his rebounding is such and such, and his athleticism is this, he's better marketably from this player. So that's what made me think, like, if they do it in one sport, they have to do it in the other.
Sure.
They might not speak about it so much in in GD, but it has to be a factor. The whole discussion that Ray mentioned, though, is the how much, right? Because if you have a player who's 95, or let's say he's 85 in tackling, 85 in strength, and then you have someone else that's 80, but the athleticism is 30 for one and 80 for the other. I think in that case it's kind of hands down. But I would go for the athleticism over over something else, thinking that it's a multiplier.
And you bring up a good point. The fact that if you've got a player that's a running back that's 90 speed, 90 strength, 90 elusiveness, and he's got an athleticism rating of 70, and then you've got a guy down at 70 speed, 70 strength, 70 elusiveness, and he also has an athleticism rating of 70. Does that athleticism at 70 for him bump him more than the 70 for the guy that's darn near topped out? What do you think, Eric?
I don't know. I would think that if the athleticism is the same, but the other factors are the athleticism is the same, but the other factors are bigger for one and smaller than the other. I would still think you're higher guy on the main traits that you're looking for, your speed and elusiveness than your strength. I think that, I don't know that it brings the 70 guy any closer to the 90 guy just because 90 guy's close to being topped out.
Right.
The athleticism for me, I don't know. I kind of look at it in, the position. You look at a wide receiver. I would think athleticism would be, a quarterback makes a throw to the guy. A lower athletic guy may not, the diving catch, or they may not come out and say it, but does the athleticism give the wide receiver a chance on a lesser catchable ball to make the catch than a guy with less athleticism? A running back maybe breaking a tackle or making a move that another running back that doesn't have the athleticism make, or a quarterback avoiding a sack or getting himself out of trouble when a lesser athletic guy might not. That I think that may be where the athleticism comes in more than enhancing the speed and elusiveness and other traits. It may just be more of making a play when a lesser athletic guy might not.
Now, I tend to look at it for quarterbacks, since you mentioned them. Let's take two quarterbacks that played in different eras. One is Randall Cunningham for Cass, since he's an Eagles fan. and the other being Brett Favre. Now, I would argue to say that as far as their overall career, they had similar highlights as far as what they accomplished. They were notorious for throwing the ball, being able to get out of sticky wickets, being able to make things happen. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, which one of those two was more athletic? And I would go hands down Randall Cunningham all day long. He was a true blue athlete, and Brett Favre had skills that Randall may not have had. And Randall possessed skills that Brett didn't have. And those were his two legs primarily. He could get out of some situations that Brett couldn't. So, that just shows me, if What If Sports tries to mimic reality, that you can have two guys of different caliber perform in the same manner just because one of them is more athletic than the other.
I don't think we could talk, actual here, because we know Randall had a 95-yard punt. And, and we also know that Randall didn't have anybody to throw to. All right.
Well,
My thoughts exactly.
But
If Randall had Brett's team to play with, he would have won a couple
yes.
Super Bowls.
Yeah,
And there's
yeah,
no
I
way in
agree with
hell
that.
Brett would have booted a 95-yard punt.
Yeah, but you got to ask yourself: did Randall ever throw a touchdown pass to Jerry Rice? No. Brett has. Have you seen the Copper Fit commercials?
Well, see, when you're talking wide receivers, I was thinking someone like comparing a Jerry Rice athletic to maybe an Edelman.
Yeah, exactly. Amendola, Edelman, both those guys.
Yeah.
They don't have the necessary skill and height,
like a
but
Rice or a Moss
too.
on one side, and Rice and Moss on one side, Edelman, Amendola on the other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think you might have to go with a Rice against the Moss, because remember they said Jerry ran a 4.6.
True.
He was just an excellent route runner, they said.
Yeah, but, technique.
Technique, yes, technique. So technique is important.
Yeah, that's it, technique.
You know, for the newbies,
would be the main factor.
for the newbies, right? Like, I know we always mention it, but I would say go and take a look at the like, I don't know how much they've changed since the the interview. What's the interview? The interview with the developer.
The dev chats?
Well,
the deviation chats?
No.
Or with Tariq Camille?
With Tarek actually gave some very good information in there.
Yes.
You know, the whole, like I said, I love it when he mentioned, he actually confirmed the whole, well, you know, we made it so that you could win with any team, you know, with any formation, I was actually, oh, really? All right. You know, but when you actually go down, they have the breakdown where they actually go and discuss like how much, well, you know, this is slightly more important than this, and we have this, it's like, you know, and that's actually one of the things I actually at one point, I still have it, but I actually broke down everything into like, okay, if they're talking numbers, they're talking percentages off of 100, this is what it would be, right? Kind of like when you put up the play formation to start out the show. If we're looking at the play formation and we're thinking of like 100%, right? We have to think that with those five options, you're going, you can actually find out the percentage for each. Whoever's formation that was, that's 60 short divided by 100, you know, and, you know, then, you know, when you factor in the 25%, or the 20% of that, once you go back and, you know, you go through that, you can actually look and say, okay, this is what the percentage should be. And then that would be your opportunity to test, you know, when you do your formations, like if you start there at the bottom base, hey, this is what I'm looking, and I'm going to test A, B, C. And then you go back and you actually factor those things out. You can actually see how is my completion percentage, or how's my blah, blah, blah working against what I plan to do or what I wanted to do. You know, and then that'll give you an opportunity to see where the deviation comes in as far as, you know, whatever chance or whatever else they might have put in the game, you know. So it's pretty good to go ahead and do that, because I know I'm doing it with with basketball. And as far as recruiting in basketball, you know, finding out how much, you know, percentage is this, it's actually pretty cool to watch and see that develop. So some of that stuff I actually try to, you know, bring to GD and say, hey, this is what it should look like, you know, if I'm throwing at this guy 100% of the time. It's not 100% of the time. You know, you want to throw it to him 100% of the time, but there's a factor that factors into that. And how does it break down on a whole as part of a 100? How does it break down on a whole as part of if you have, you know, 4 wide receivers or 5 wide receivers as an option and all that sort of thing.
Now, Ray, how much time do you use against Sims to either, or I should say not how much time, but what are you more likely to do against Sims by tweaking an already existing game plan, or do you use that opportunity to try out some new off-the-wall stuff?
Most of the time, I just haven't really tried any tweaking yet, tried any new game plans yet. I've got pretty much half a dozen playbooks on offense I use, and pretty much the one I go against Sims is just one designed to run the score up to oblivion and blow them out of the water. Try to put up video game stats and all that fun stuff.
So now we know how those guys got those records that you were just talking about earlier. That's how. Now we know. You see there, Ray? You see there?
Got
What was that?
Did you not see that? Check it out.
What was?
That was a guy saying, "Got him." Anyway, back to
as far as new stuff, I've done it in playoff games. If I wanted to try something different and came up against somebody that was pretty good, I just try to, like, especially with throwing the ball, try throwing it somewhere where I haven't been throwing it all season. Concentrate on where his weaknesses are. And I've busted that out in semifinal, quarterfinal games, and sometimes I've had luck. Sometimes that's blown up in my face. So
that's been my experience. It blows up in my face and comes back to bite me, and I'm left scratching my head, going, "Okay, now what? Total revamp this thing." Eric, have you tried some different, not necessarily formations, but schemes when you're going up against Sims? Or you do try to fine tune your team?
Yeah, most of the time I try to fine tune my team, and as I said earlier, try to maybe get some guys some playing time that haven't had a chance to play. Just again, you get the score up big at halftime, and move your depth chart around just to maybe build up some work ethic on some guys that need it just because they haven't seen the field. And one thing I've always kind of disliked about WIS is the fact that in a normal, you were talking about realism earlier. In a normal situation, if you've got a senior quarterback, the junior quarterback knows he's not going to get a lot of playing time. So I don't understand why work ethic would drop for a sophomore or a junior quarterback when there's a higher ranking guy in front of him, because
exactly
that's not realistic. And I asked that question one time is, hey, I've got a sophomore quarterback, and my senior starting, he should, because he's better and has the better statistics, but my sophomore's losing work ethic. Why is that? And they said, oh, it's because, he has some kind of expectation of playing time. That's not real. He shouldn't have any expectation of playing time because he's got a guy in front of him that's better. So I've never understood why you set it up that way to have a guy lose work ethic, because by the time that guy's a senior, he's not as good of a senior as he could have been because he lost work ethic.
Exactly.
And I just don't agree with that.
Well, one of the things that I noticed in some of my trial and error opportunities with that is in the scouting report, where it says, this guy is a team player, or the converse, this guy is all about himself. He's egotistical. The egotistical guy, the guy that's all about himself, is the one that will have a greater work ethic percentage drop or point drop if he's not playing, even though he's behind a better quality player. The guy who's a team player and who's got that positive, yay, let's go team attitude that's reflected in the AC scout, I believe it is, and maybe the head coach scout. That guy's going to experience a lower drop in work ethic, if any at all, if he's behind a better quality player. Now, what I have not tried is a guy who's the better quality player playing behind a lesser quality player, to the extent that it's long enough for me to actually discern, yes, this affects that guy. Because, let's face it, if you recruited a guy for his numbers to eventually be the starter, you want to do what you can, like you were saying, Eric, to keep his numbers from dropping. But unfortunately, you can't always get him that playing time that he thinks he needs. So do you go out and specifically now look for those guys who have those positive reports in the AC Scout? I actually do. If it comes down to two guys who are very similar, I mentally project, okay, how much work ethic is this guy going to lose in 2 or 3 years? Where is that drop in work ethic going to affect his numbers in comparison to this guy that's a team player who may be 1 or 2 points down in some categories, but by the time he's a junior or senior, he's actually better than this guy because he's a team player. Thoughts, Ray?
I'll pass right now. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Kaz, we'll go to you.
I can't say that I've seen too much. I actually try to. I think I've been getting hit with a limit of growth as far as work ethic for my quarterbacks because of that. Because I actually managed to get both of them playing time. Whenever, like you were saying, Waregl, if ever I'm in that situation where the blowout's happening, I have my second team going in. It's set at my formation set at, and this might help folks beat me later. But my formation set is if I'm ever beating a sim by 21 points with 15 minutes left, they're in the game.
Yeah. Mine's 22 points.
Yeah, well, you see, I might have to up it now. But the thing is that all those rookies and everything, that's when they get in there and they get a chance to play. I actually get more out of seeing them play sometimes and what they're doing with the same offense. Because actually I didn't change the offense. I just swapped in who goes in. So I created the same offense. I shifted it and put in the younger guys. But seeing that, I sometimes get more out of it than watching the guys who are starters play. But with the quarterback situation, I try to get them both to playing time. So my seniors never get to that 80% anymore. I used to back when I'd get seniors getting to 80% because I'd start them as a redshirt freshman and they play all the way through and they play 60, 70% of snaps. But now I kind of have guys where they'll play 42% or 48. The other guy will play 42, and they kind of flip flops. And then, of course, somebody else is sprinkled in there.
Well, here's some food for thought in the same line of thinking that you were talking about with your underclassmen offense, as I call mine, where you stay with the same offense and just substitute your players. I actually use a different offense or defense depending on where my freshmen sit on the roster. For instance, let's say that I've got a heavy say I've got 3 wide receivers that are freshmen this year, and I've got no freshman running backs for whatever happened. I'm not going to run my freshman in the Notre Dame box offense. I'm going to run a trips offense and get all 3 of those wide receivers on the field and get them as much playing time as possible. The same is true, conversely, on the defensive side of the ball. If I've got 3 or 4 linebackers that are freshmen and I've only got 1 or 2 defensive linemen that are freshmen, I'm going to run that 3-4 defense to get majority of those freshman linebackers on the field and get them some playing time. What do you think about that, Eric?
Well,
you try something like that?
You know what? I guess that just depends on what you think about formation IQ, because if your practice, do you practice both of those defenses that you're talking about?
No, I practice the defense that is my predominant defense and my predominant offense. So that way they're getting their practice formation IQ up based on practice time, not what they're doing in the game. I don't think game time impacts the formations they run in the game impacts what they do in practice, quite honestly, or for their formation IQ.
I mean,
I've not seen an increase.
I think that's an ingenious way to get guys playing time by switching formations like that. I never would have thought to do that, just because, but I guess if I'm up big on a sim, then if my guys start making mistakes, it's probably not going to kill it. So it's smart.
Yeah.
Just because you are getting their work ethic up. I mean, there's nothing that says they have to be running the same formation they practice. They're in the game. They should be getting that extra boost in work ethic and whatever. So that's I never would have thought to do that. I'm not sure I'm that brave, but I just think that I'm not one of those guys that like to say I want a freshman running back every year. I want a freshman quarterback every year. My whatever my roster was, I've got numbers that I look at for my roster, and I want to have this many quarterbacks, this many running backs, this many wide receivers, and if when I go over the team, the person before me didn't have a rotation like that, then I'm not going to force myself to have a rotation like that. I'm just going to kind of play that hand as I was dealt and then work from there.
Well, just to clarify this, I only do that for my underclassmen offense when I'm ahead by, like Kaz was saying, 22 points at the start of the fourth quarter or something. That's when I may bring in that underclassman to get playing time. But the game plan is set up that if they start screwing up and the score gets close again, they're out of there. It's the starters. Get them starters back in there. Ray, do you do anything like that? You're a freshman?
What I have done from time to time, I kind of got away from it because I was set up like a JV team playbook. I would go like on the offensive line. My main offensive line are just offensive line 1 through 5. My underclassmen, freshmen, sophomores, I put them on the guards, tackles, centers, and do it with all of them. And just like you with the Sims 14, 21-point lead, go with the JV playbook. But I've had it happen a couple of times where then I had a human the next day while I was busy recruiting one team or a couple of my teams and forgot to go back and change it. And
it kills me.
Got ugly.
I'm guilty of that more times than not.
I think listening to you guys, I realized I probably got too many accounts and too many teams.
My question would be, right, is that, and one thing that I was I am a little bit worried about with putting in the freshman at a certain point is that if the game engine, right, if the engine, as some of us believe, actually factors in, it goes play by play, they said, right? Each play is simmed individually. But I think sometimes when I look at it, I think that they look at what you have down the pipe. Okay, what is this? You go through everything, and what does his overtime say? Oh, his overtime says he's going to run the ball. Okay, well, this is what's going to happen. Here's the difference, right? And if that's the case, and we are putting in our freshmen, and they're doing something totally crazy or harebrained, it might be the difference. If they're simming on the whole thing, it might be the difference between that, that completion and the interception.
Yeah, well, the one thing I will say is I've tweaked it enough to where I can see, of course, the play-by-play tells you what offense you're running or whatever the case may be based on your game plan. But I've seen where just watching the Wizcast where you get to see the game in action, just watching that, I can tell without looking at the score when those freshmen get yanked for screwing up because the score got close. It's like there's weird stuff going that I normally wouldn't do. There's a wishbone formation and it's 4th and 18 and they're going to run up the middle. It's like, yeah, that's not my normal game plan. I can just watch that and kind of see how things are transpiring throughout the course of the quarter or the minutes that they're in. And see that, oh, yeah, now we're back to the normal offense. Everything is going smoothly. And hopefully, it won't lead to that overtime where I bite myself in the ass for trying to get a couple freshmen some extra points. Guys, we're at over 48 minutes, and that's what I like about StreamYard. It allows us to run up here close to an hour, and if not more. But for the purposes of today, we're going to wrap this thing up here momentarily. And this is the last thing I want to discuss with you guys. Now, you have to bear in mind, I'm not trying to be an ass, but read the forums before you post your question to the forum. Your answer may already be waiting for you. How many times do we see, how do I increase my running backs touchdowns? How do I increase this? How do I do? And you look 3 posts down, and it's the exact same question and asked by somebody else. And guys, newbies, listen, stop. We know you're anxious. We know you're in a hurry. We know you want to get to that D1 national championship. Slow down. Look at the forums. Go beyond that one page. Do some searching. You'll be amazed at the amount of information that is on those forums that will get you way further down the road than you think the answer to that particular question will get you. I know that Kaz is on their post, and Eric, Ray. There are genius football coaches out there who, throughout various posts, will post their answers, suggestions, hints, tips, whatever the case may be. So again, this is not intended as a slight, but read the forums before you post a question to the forum. Because like it says, your answer may be waiting for you. Am I right, Kaz? I mean, do you think I'm off base with that?
No, I think you're 100% right. And I say the number of nights that I've laid in bed and I go back to the developer chat from 2009, just trying to get what. There's a nugget in here. There's a nugget in here that I must have missed, and I'll go back and I'll look at every developer chat, just trying to get a little bit of information. And at the same time saying, okay, well, I heard that before, O-line 5-1, they're going to, influence on this. Yeah, but that puts down a tackle, or tackle guard, or what about the tight end? How does the tight end factor into it now? Should I leave the tight end in? So it's in there. You just got to mind the information.
Well, I know Ray found a nugget or two apparently because he took over my dilapidated Oklahoma team and in 1 year started kicking ass with them. So he found a nugget somewhere. It definitely wasn't the recruits I left him.
Oh, I got lucky there. Yeah, I don't know. I got Oklahoma there. I got Oklahoma in Heisman, and I've heard from different people in the past that, it's a wasteland to recruit from, and I love it.
Yeah, I've got it in one of the worlds, and I found that after the first couple seasons, recruiting tends to be a little more accommodating to you because the big guys surrounding you don't understand or no longer know that you don't have a lot of bowl money to recruit with. So, once you get that first year or two under your belt and you get that war chest built up, then those guys tend to kind of stay away a little bit, if for lack of a better term for that. Eric, as far as the forums go, what do you think as far as these newbies just inundating with the repetitive questions and stuff? We need to clean that up. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I'll just say it right now. You have to wait 24 hours after you send your first recruiting things to get a response.
Oh my gosh.
That is the most repeated question on the forums, and I get it. I do get it. In fact, I think when I was gone for a while, because it did change. I don't think it was like that at the first.
No. Uh-uh.
It was every 3, I think, at the very beginning of it.
Right off the get-go.
Yep, and then it changed at some point. And when I came back after being gone for a while, I think I even asked that question on the forums too. So it's I don't want to be hypocritical here, but I do see that question asked a lot. Is I sent my stuff, I haven't got any responses yet. You have to wait 24 hours, and I think that maybe when you get a new account or something, maybe there's a page that you see when you first log in that shows some of the development questions and the basic kind of stuff instead of, because guys will see stuff pinned at the top and they may or may not pay attention to that, but maybe there's a way to kind of smack them in the head a little bit and say, okay guys, make sure this is what you need to read before you really get too far involved in all this, and and maybe WIS can help draw more attention to those, because it's not easy. I can remember I did one of the free seasons in Hoops Dynasty, and I was completely lost, and it was one of those deals where you could go on the forums and whatever, but if you don't know what to ask or you don't know what you're doing, it's kind of tough to find those questions that are gonna be helpful, but also not, redundant. And, we as veteran coaches need to have a little more patience with that. And I think we do for the most part, but, there are some questions. Like I said, the recruiting one is, waiting the 24 hours. That's the big one for me that I see a lot of times. And it makes me cringe, but I try to be patient with that and answer it nicely if I can.
When can we cut players? When can I get this dead weight off my team?
Yeah.
How many times?
How many players can we cut?
Yeah.
How many can we cut? Can I cut this whole team?
Man, guys, I tell you, this has been fun. I really appreciate you guys supporting me and coming on, especially with the relatively short notice that we had for this. But again, I just hope some of the new guys and even us veterans learn something from these shows, because it is a camaraderie environment. You know, we all get along. We all like to pick on each other. We all like to throw that championship ring in Ray's face, as the intro alluded to. But
Hey, I want to say right now, I saw that last night, laughed my ass off. I had to call Jay and tell him about it. But I got to tell you right now, I finally got one of my boys a natty.
All right.
My son Lucas is a DB on my Oklahoma team in Heisman, and we won last season. So
now, for those that are tuning in that didn't see that show, Ray, you have to elaborate and kind of give some background. We've got several minutes left. Go right ahead and tell us why Jay ragged you with using your kids on his team.
Well, see, these players I like to stat whore with are usually, if I'll try to recruit somebody with the same name at like running back, wide receiver. Get two with the same last name, same initials on the first name. Then I'll contact with, say, hey, can you change this freshman player to one of my boys' names? Lorenzo, Giovanni, Lucas. Well, I've been doing that for a year or so, and you can see on the stat records, they got all-time records all over the place, but I never won the national title. Well, Jay did it with Lorenzo as a defensive back, and lo and behold, he won the national title with him at Texas State, and I can't remember which world it was, but yeah, as a junior, senior, won as a national title. I never heard the end of it until, well, I thought it was a few weeks ago when I won with Lucas, but our good friend Magic over here had to remind me about it yesterday.
And, you know, it's
Jay
on the intro, and that intro is like permanent.
Yep, I heard that and was like, oh my gosh, I've got to come in there and tell them I've righted the ship. One of my boys won a title with me as a coach, not some other knucklehead.
Man, well, guys, we're going to wrap it up and close. You know, we can't close on any better laughter than that. So once again, I hope you guys like the new format. I'm really liking it, digging it, and hopefully, like I said, the guys will learn something that tune in and listen. So again, for all three of you, appreciate you being on, and hope to see you again on some other show, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night, guys.
See you on
the night, everybody. This concludes this episode of This, That, and the Other. Come back and join us next Thursday night. I'm your host, Magic. Everybody play safe and play ball.